A short forward before the start of this episode. Earlier today, we received news of the deaths of footballers and brothers Diogo Jota and André Silva. We on the podcast here follow English and European football very closely, so we've seen Diogo Jota do some great things for Liverpool as well as for Portugal. And André Silva, we honestly can't say we've followed too closely, but we have since heard of the amazing contributions he has made to the first and second tiers of Portuguese football. Our thoughts and prayers go out to their family as they deal with this loss.
Welcome back to the CoDaKrew podcast. About a week ago, Swapnil and I made our round of 16 predictions for the Club World Cup, and unlike our Gold Cup predictions, these did not go horribly wrong. I actually got 6 out of 8 of my predictions right, and Swapnil got 4, and I would say that given all of the upsets that happened in this round, I'm not going to be too mad about that. So with that being said, in this episode we're going to do the exact same thing, except only this time we'll be predicting the 4 quarterfinal games in the Club World Cup. So, where should we begin?
Well, I honestly think, Darian, that we can just go in order of how these matches are scheduled. And in that case, the first match that we'd start with would be Fluminense versus the only AFC team remaining in the tournament, Al-Hilal. So, starting with Fluminense, their game against Inter Milan, a pretty big upset, and one I don't think we saw coming in our predictions. I know I had Milan going through. But really, in this match, Inter, they looked like a side that was still haunted by their UCL final. They were flat, disconnected, and they got stunned early by a sharp Fluminense side that made every moment count. Kano pounced in the opening minutes. He got a deflected cross, and he buried the header through Sommer's legs. And immediately, shades of that PSG collapse started to resurface. Inter, they saw a ton of the ball. They had like close to 70% possession, but they rarely looked threatening. They ended with more shots, more passes, but fewer creative chances. Lautaro Martinez finally woke up around the hour mark. He nearly scored twice, but just as Inter were tilting the game in their favor, Fluminense hit again. Hercules came off the bench and curled in a perfect strike with time winding down. Game over. And unfortunately for Inter, it seems like their terrible form from the UCL final has continued to haunt them going into another knockout tournament.
And this is yet another masterclass by Fluminense's defense. We saw this in the very first game that they played against Dortmund in the group stage, where despite all the possession Dortmund were having, they basically did not have any real opportunities to score at all. And Fluminense, even though they didn't have a lot of chances in that match, really contained the game and played it through their style. We saw that again, except this time, in the few chances they got, they definitely took full advantage. So, I mean, this game, to me, really shows the defensive quality that Fluminense will have, and looking forward to a match against Al-Hilal, who, despite being not a European squad, which means that people are automatically going to not see them as a contender, unfounded or not, this Fluminense squad, I think, is going to be happy with that matchup, because that means they'll be able to sit back and play the low block again, and they'll be able to use the deadly counters that they've done so far to try and score some goals.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about Al-Hilal, that match against Man City was absolute cinema. The shock of the tournament so far. This scoreline is something I'd expect to see from one of the Brazilian teams, not from Man City and the one remaining Asian team. Al-Hilal, they took down the tournament, arguably a tournament favorite, in a thriller that felt like a classic Champions League game. And I know FIFA wants this competition to be the Champions League really bad, and maybe they've accomplished it here. I mean, Bernardo Silva, he opened the scoring early, he got a scrambled finish amid some handball shouts, but the game flipped completely right after halftime. You had Malcolm exploding down the right, setting up Marcus Leonardo, then scoring one himself, 2-1 Al-Hilal within 6 minutes of the restart. Haaland equalized quickly, but from there the game just broke wide open going into extra time. And it didn't slow the chaos at all, because you had that Koulibaly goal rising high to nod home a corner straight as extra time started. Then you had that great Foden equalizer off of a Cherky cross, and then a wonderful winner from Leonardo, who took a rebound from Ederson and bundled it home. 4-3, absolute pandemonium. What an amazing match.
What a goddamn first ever Oil Clasico, man. I can't believe that we were both cheering for the oil money side going up against the big bad, but that's what happened in this situation, and the generational hate watch vs Man City was so satisfying. In that first half, it definitely looked like City were going to run away with it for quite a bit of time, but Bono made 11 saves in this game with 6 just in the first half, and I would argue that if any other keeper were in net, City would have scored at least 3 goals by the time it was halftime. Bono with several incredible saves to keep Al-Hilal into the game. But in that second half, as they got more in, players like Malcolm, who were so good at dribbling through the Man City defense, players like Leonardo, who had such good positioning and were so clinical during this match, helped Al-Hilal come back. And when you have players as well, like Joao Cancelo, who was so good in that game, he had a crazy dinger assist for that second goal from Al-Hilal, and straight off kickoff, Al-Hilal could have had a third, but he had a beautiful cross that would have, not cross, a beautiful long ball that would have been a penalty, but unfortunately Malcolm was just slightly offside and so it didn't count. But that being said, this Al-Hilal squad was very good. We even saw, like, late into the second half, Ali Lajami with a goal line clearance late to prevent Man City from winning and bring it into extra time. Koulibaly with a clutch extra time header and amazing defense. There's just so many good players on this team, and they were so cohesive. Man City were cohesive as well, I would argue, but Al-Hilal was just that little bit better, and it really goes to show that for me, they are a true contender.
Yeah, no, Al-Hilal, they kept their structure tight. Their counters were absolutely devastating, and their big names, Koulibaly, Neves, Malcolm, and like you said, Bono, they all stepped up when it mattered. And honestly, I think City's defense just looked overwhelmed by the end of this game, by the pace and the long switches, and their bench options didn't really change the flow of this game. The midfield just ran out of gas, and I don't know, you'd expect a massive team with massive financial backing from UEFA, like Man City, to have all the depth in the world necessary to beat a team like Al-Hilal. But I really think Al-Hilal brought just so much more energy to this game, and despite maybe having a weaker bench, they were able to do great things with the players they had here. And what do you know? They ended up with a historic win, a statement for Asian football. A Saudi team has just knocked out Europe's most stacked club, and they earned every bit of it. Most stacked besides Madrid, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few teams we can put in there, but for the sake of argument, I think, yeah, it's a fair statement. I will say, Man City, and this is quite ironic given the fact that Man City is, like, on paper the significantly better squad. Man City relied on individual moments, and Al-Hilal played cohesively as a team. And you know how you're talking about the substitutes, right? How they didn't really add much to the tempo and the actual tactical style that Man City played. But they did bring them one extra goal. Ryan Turkey with an absolutely disgusting pass, and Phil Foden controlling it so well. We were talking about a few weeks ago during the Nations League final how Ronaldo was able to control such a difficult cross, and same thing for Phil Foden. And also, just because it was difficult doesn't mean it was not an amazing cross. If Ryan Turkey had aimed it a few inches either direction, shallower or deeper, it would not have worked. So perfect play by them. But there's still a big difference between that, where it's just an individual moment, vs Al-Hilal, who under Inzaghi plays so cohesively. They play an offensive, fun style, which is quite ironic to me, given how defensive Inzaghi was with Inter Milan. And it really works. I mean, even against stronger opposition on paper, where you're supposedly supposed to go defensive and take a low block, and that's the only way to win, Al-Hilal will flip that script. Not only is this a massive win for Asian football, but it's also a very interesting case study for the new era of tactical football that we're going to see in the next few years.
Yeah, and there are definitely some interesting tactics to be had in this upcoming quarterfinals matchup. Really, it's a clash of philosophies. I mean, Fluminense, they're going to want to control rhythm, string together sequences, and slowly break teams down. But Hilal, they want chaos, and they're thriving in it. I mean, we just saw it. They took out Man City with basically organized chaos. And that counter threat with Malcolm and Leonardo will test Fluminense's backline like nothing before. I mean, you look at Malcolm, he is in terrifying form. He gave Akanji and Walker fits, and Marcelo, as legendary as he is, may not have the legs to handle him 1v1. Though I will say, Fluminense is going to need to score to win. Players like Herman Cano with his movement and anticipation will be absolutely key for them. He doesn't need many touches, but give him half a yard in the box and he can absolutely bury a shot. But Hilal have an X factor. Ruben Neves. His diagonal switches and calm under pressure are going to help them flip the field, perfect against a team that is desperate to try and press in numbers. And don't discount Hilal's defense. Koulibaly and Al-Bulahi were brilliant against City's aerial bombardment. They'll likely be targeted again here, but I think they're going to hold strong against this Fluminense team.
This is going to be one of the most fun matchups, definitely, of the quarterfinals. Not just because, as you were saying, we have a clash of philosophy here, the low block physical style vs the chaotic offensive style, but we're also going to be guaranteed to have at least one non-UEFA squad into the semifinals, with Fluminense from Brazil or Al-Hilal from Saudi Arabia. And this is a very big point that people have already said a lot throughout this tournament, but I want to reiterate once again. We all assumed that UEFA teams were going to dominate this tournament and that they were clear of everybody else internationally in the game. People were saying that the Champions League is the real Club World Cup, and we were being proven more and more that this is not true. We have a guaranteed non-UEFA squad into the semis. We have on one side of the bracket only one UEFA squad left. Only 5 out of 8 of the current teams are in UEFA. We have still 2 Brazilian teams, 1 Saudi Arabian team. And with that being said, like, you look at the actual World Cup, right? It's very common for there to only be one team outside of Europe to make it the Final Four. And now we're guaranteed at least one, with Palmeiras quite possibly being able to beat Chelsea as well for a second. So people are going to make the excuse that, oh, UEFA teams had more congestion, they're tired, this should be their offseason. But it is worth noting that the teams that had the most games, I believe, over the past 12 months coming to this tournament were actually the 4 teams from Brazil. So that argument is not valid. So I mean, it's super clear at this point. The separation is definitely a lot smaller than we all think it is, even though it's there. And a lot of clubs, I think, like the mid-tables, the upper mid-tables, the lower table clubs in elite European leagues are going to see these players that are cooking against the best of the best in the world and see, hey, he's maybe a bit older than the type of player we would get from South America or Asia, etc., etc. But you know what? He's so good that he could fit into our system anyways, and that could change the way that European teams look at their transfers going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget that with this matchup, we have a team that sent home the recent English Continental treble winners in Man City. And we have a team that just sent the Champions League finals runner-ups packing. So this is a matchup with 2 teams that have defied expectations and beaten 2 massive UEFA giants. So I really think this match is just a testament to how well these other confederations have done to break expectations around them in this tournament. But going back to the matchup, I talked about how Fluminense are going to want to press against this Al-Hilal team, but it's a risky maneuver. If Hilal break it early, it's going to expose the slow center backs and force Fabio into heroics again. Speaking of Fabio, by the way, this guy is insane. He's 44, made 6 saves against Inter. He has the second most official appearances for a pro player, and at this rate, he's going to pass Peter Shilton for first place. Legendary career. But how many times can you ask a veteran keeper to be one of your best players? If this match manages to stay 0-0 into the second half, it plays into Fluminense's hands. But if Hilal score first, this opens up and gets dangerous. And I think with the emotional high of knocking out City and the momentum of a balanced, confident squad, Hilal are going to ride the wave into the semis. They're the fitter team right now. Fluminense covered more distance versus Inter, made fewer subs, and lack game changers on the bench. Hilal's got the depth they need to get through this game. It's going to be a tight one, but they're going to finish the job late, and I'm going to give them a 2-0 win to become our first semifinalists in this Club World Cup.
Even after scoring 2 goals against Inter Milan, I still have questions about Fluminense's offense. I mean, again, a very similar game they played against Inter Milan as they did against Dortmund, and in that match they weren't able to score. They weren't able to score against Mamelodi either. And while I don't want to fully discredit them, I think a large reason for why they were able to get those chances and score 2 goals was because despite the fact they played like this all season, it seems like under a new manager, Inter Milan was almost playing as if they didn't understand the 3-in-the-back system. Like, the defenders were constantly not positioning themselves correctly. They were not playing cohesively, and especially for that second goal that really sealed the deal for Fluminense, that was really evident. Against a more well-balanced, a more drilled team like Al-Hilal, I'm not sure they're going to be able to make those same breakthroughs, and just like they have in half of their games so far in the Club World Cup, I don't see Fluminense scoring. And meanwhile, you have on Al-Hilal players like João Cancelo who can unlock a defense, players like Malcolm that can dribble past potentially Fluminense's slower defenders, and I see that Al-Hilal, through their very strong offense, can easily score at least a goal or two. So I'm going to agree with you and also have Al-Hilal winning this match 2-0.
Okay, interesting. Looks like we agree for the first match. We'll have to move on to the second and see how our predictions fare here. So we've got another Brazilian team in Palmeiras, and they will be facing up against Chelsea. Now, if we start with Palmeiras, their match against Botafogo, it wasn't the most technical, but it felt huge. Of course, it was a Brazilian rivalry with knockout stakes and a roaring green and white crowd in Philly that gave Palmeiras a real home edge. And Botafogo, they came in with the upper hand historically. Of course, they're unbeaten in their last 5 versus Palmeiras, and they are the team that knocked them out of last year's Libertadores. But Botafogo never really showed up here. Palmeiras looked more dangerous from the very outset. Estevão was electric, combining flair and aggression, and Vitor Roque and Mauricio offered different kinds of direct threats. Despite their possession dominance, Palmeiras couldn't manage to break through in the first half. But Botafogo, they were invisible for pretty much the whole 90 minutes. They had just 4 shots in regulation and an XG of 0.13. Ultra defensive, cautious, and clearly playing for extra time. They did get extra time, but then came the moment. Estevão subbed off, and on came Paulinho, and it only took him 10 minutes to make the difference. A tight dribble, a calm finish through defenders' legs, and wild scenes behind the goal. And with how these two teams are playing, there was only one club I could see winning this, and that's Palmeiras.
Palmeiras showed yet another way to win. I've talked about this before, but they're one of those teams where they can play many different tactical styles at once, depending on their opposition, and it's worked for them very well so far in this Club World Cup, and they did yet again. Against a fellow Brazilian squad, they played a physical game, and they had a grind out for a very tough but fair result against a very defensively strong Botafogo and an incredible keeper in John Victor. I think there's a lot of inexperience that was shown in this Palmeiras game with their attack. I think there were times that players just shot on sight, they shot too early, they didn't make the extra pass to get a perfect chance, and I think part of that was because Botafogo were able to frustrate them, and they didn't get a lot of chances, and because of that, they felt that they had to shoot immediately whenever they got one. And that makes sense, but I think that does sort of show the youth and the immaturity that this team has to an extent. And then there was also, early in the second half, Eustáquio scoring a goal that was called offside because he was slightly off when he was the only player on the side of the pitch when the ball was pinged to him on the wing. Like, there's no reason for you to be offside in that position, right? So there's a little bit of like lack of discipline that I see. But to be fair, it's still a very, very strong attack. I've talked about how good this front three was before, and like with the finish that Paulinho got, I mean, that just proves it, right? Such a class finish, taking a dribble, just destroying the other defender so effortlessly, and then shooting that perfectly aimed, amazing accuracy. It's unsavable. And honestly, Palmeiras probably could have gotten a few more goals if John Victor wasn't so good for Botafogo in net.
Right, and of course, despite all that Palmeiras pressure, they were only up 1-0. And Botafogo, they did push late, especially after that red card for Gustavo Gomes, which left Palmeiras down to 10 with a couple minutes left. But Botafogo, they just waited too long. Their first real pressure came with a couple minutes to spare. And defensively, Palmeiras were nails. Even down a man, they stayed organized, pressed well, and they never lost control of the tempo. Weverton wasn't called into anything major even when Palmeiras were a man down. This win really showed Palmeiras' mentality. They lost this matchup twice in 2024, but they stayed composed in this match and they got the revenge. And they are a step closer now to proving that they are Brazil's best club. It is a testament to the pragmatism of Abel Ferreira and this Palmeiras roster. The flair players played with discipline. The team suffered together late on. Ultimately, this was a mature, composed knockout win, and they are more than deserving of going through to the quarterfinals.
Yeah, even though we both had Palmeiras winning this match, I think we do have to give some credit to the fact that historically Botafogo had the advantage, and as you're saying, Botafogo won the last 2 times that they played against each other. But I also want to talk about Chelsea, obviously, and the match that they had against Benfica. Because while on the surface, a 4-1 scoreline looks really good, I was not fully convinced with how Chelsea played. Because they really struggled to break down Benfica's backline of Antonio Silva and Otamendi before the red card. In fact, in that entire game, including after the red card, despite the fact neither of those two center backs were subbed on, they both won every ground and aerial duel that they had in that match. And in the first half, Antonio Silva, in one of the few chances Chelsea gets, where Cucurella gets a very good strike, he makes a clutch goal line clearance off of a header. And Chelsea were, in the regulation time, somewhat bailed out by a wonder strike by Reece James, I would say. They weren't actually able to, in open play, go past the Benfica squad. And while they were quite unlucky with, the handball that that led to Benfica getting a penalty and be able to get the equalizer, I think that very unlucky call, that's sort of balanced off by that very lucky goal by Reece James. Obviously, once there is a red card, Chelsea are able to just dominate for that game, and they look very solid. But I still see quite a few problems.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I mean, Benfica, they went down to 10 men after Prestiani saw red, but somehow they managed to win a penalty 3 minutes later. And Chelsea, they really looked rattled. I mean, of course, they pulled it together. Nkunku reacted quick to a loose ball in the box, and he got a clever finish in to score their second goal in extra time. Then you had Neto adding a third, and Dewsbury Hall capped it off in the 117th. So that extra time was quite dominant, but you have to question whether that was up to Chelsea having a great big burst of energy or just Benfica lacking control as extra time started. And honestly, if we're going to talk about the extra time, I think we have to talk about what happened just before, which was the weather delay. And here's the headline. Chelsea versus Benfica got hit with the longest weather delay in Club World Cup history, 113 minutes. You had a lightning storm stopping the game cold at 1-1 just minutes after Di Maria equalized. Tension sky high.
Before Di Maria equalized.
It was before, you're right. And he got that penalty and they went into extra time. Sky high tension. The thing is, ultimately, Chelsea adapted, Benfica didn't. During that delay, Chelsea, they were running passing drills in the corridor, and Benfica, apparently they were mostly walking laps. And when play resumed, Chelsea dropped 3 goals in 30 minutes. It was a turning point for the game, really, because Maresca's rotation, fresh legs, Caicedo's second wind, it all clicked after that break. And this wasn't a one-off, of course, because there have been 6 weather delays so far in the tournament. FIFA is sweating ahead of the 2026 World Cup, especially with similar venues. Bottom line, weather is now a real tactical variable in this tournament that teams must watch out for, and it's going to be a looming issue for the World Cup next year.
Now, that being said, you did say a lot of good things about Chelsea there, and I feel like I have to balance out a little bit of Chelsea hatred. Now, you know that I have not been rating Chelsea very much in the Premier League this season, and I'm going to do that once again in this match, and with the way they've played throughout the Club World Cup. And I think my main issue with them is, despite the fact that they have complete tempo and possession domination in all of their games, including this one, through, their very strong defensive midfielders, Caicedo and Lavia, they aren't able to actually get many chances from all that possession and from all those final third entries. I think part of the issue with that is Cole Palmer, for example, who I think of is like the main attacking threat for Chelsea, the main chance creator as well as a very good chance scorer. He shouldn't be playing as a winger. They didn't play him as a number 10, which I think is his preferred position, in all but the first match against LAFC, where despite what SofaScore and FootMob might say, I think that was actually his best match, was the first game. In this game, he had 9 crosses as a winger, but because, despite the fact he may be some inverted right winger, technically that's like a secondary position he had, I mean, look, in this match, 9 crosses, 0 on target. I think that's very telling.
And I will say for Benfica, their bright spot was probably Di Maria. He had classy finish on his penalty, great movement and leadership throughout. But once Chelsea figured out how to double his zone, the supply dried up pretty much. Trubin also had a strong first 90, but again, like the whole Benfica team, he just looked unsettled in extra time. And I wouldn't necessarily back Benfica to win it in extra time without the weather delay we mentioned earlier, but I definitely think it made a difference with mentality. And whatever preparations those two teams were taking behind the scenes, something went well for Chelsea and went really terribly for Benfica because these two teams came out looking completely lopsided from each other. Now, this win, it feels like a bit of a turning point for Chelsea, I think. They faced quite a bit of adversity here. They almost managed to close off this game, and pretty much in the dying seconds of regulation time, Benfica managed an equalizer. But against adversity, they did not fold. They found another gear, they leaned on their depth, and they looked like a team that actually believes in their direction and their strategy, which is big for this Chelsea team. That's definitely been a problem for them before. And I guess now they're going to face Palmeiras in quite a high-profile quarter, and they will be grateful to escape what could have easily turned into a tournament-ending implosion.
Yeah, and just before I talk about this game, I want to highlight one more key player for Chelsea, who I think has been, despite what people have said about Liam Delap, which I don't understand at all, he's had some good moments, but he's definitely not been their best player. Despite what people have said about Caicedo, which I think is a much more fair shout, in my opinion, the best player for Chelsea so far this tournament is actually CoDaKrew. And that's because he's constantly making runs in behind to stretch out the defense, and yet he has all this pace to run back and make those one-on-one duels as a heavy defender. Like, he's almost playing the way, despite the fact he doesn't have as much pace as like an Alphonso Davies, for example, he's almost playing a very similar playstyle. Like, he's being very, very effective on both sides of the field. And on the attack especially, like a lot, especially during that first half when Chelsea couldn't get to anyone, it was the overlapping run by Marc Cucurella that that allowed him to keep applying pressure to Benfica. In this match, despite all this, as a one-on-one heavy defender, he won 8 out of 13 ground duels. And I expect him to be another major force that'll make it difficult for Palmeiras to score.
Yeah, and if we want to get to the actual game, this has the feel of a Champions League knockout match. We've got physical midfield battles, compact defenses, and a few individual stars who could manage to swing the game. Palmeiras, they're going to want to slow this game to a crawl, force Chelsea to build wide, and deny Nkunku space and challenge Caicedo's decision-making. And so Chelsea's ability to break lines is going to be critical. Caicedo must resist the urge to play safe and instead find players like Nkunku, Palmer, or Mudryk quickly between Palmeiras' midfield lines. Palmeiras' best spells are going to come when Vega has time, but Enzo Fernandez could shadow him closely, and that duel alone could swing control of the tempo. The Brazilian side will probably sit in a 4-1-4-1 when they're out of possession, but if they're too narrow, Gusto and Mudryk could cause havoc. And also, Chelsea's bench advantage is real. Dewsbury, Hall, Neto, even Jackson offer a second gear that Palmeiras might just not be able to match. If this goes to extra time, and I do think it will, Chelsea likely have more left in the legs. Palmeiras have gone the distance once already, and their midfield looked pretty gassed late on. The physicality is going to be intense. Expect a lot of fouls, a few yellows, and 1 or 2 VAR reviews. But I think Chelsea can bring this game into extra time and edge it with one moment of quality, probably from Palmer or Nkunku, in what could be the tightest of these quarterfinal matches. So I'm going to give this match another 2-1 scoreline in extra time.
You know, from the very beginning of our Club World Cup coverage, I've always said that Palmeiras is my dark horse. And I said, I think a few episodes ago, that I think Palmeiras are going to make it to the semifinals. And here they are with a match against Chelsea and an opportunity to do so. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go back on my word. And this is why. Gustavo Gomez got a red card against Botafogo. He is the captain of Palmeiras, and he will not be playing. Due to card restrictions as well, Piquerez, a massive both offensive and defensive fullback that supports Palmeiras, will be out. With that weakened Palmeiras defense, which I think defense is one of Palmeiras' actually strong suits generally speaking, it's going to be quite hard to go up against the pressure that Chelsea are able to show that they showed against Benfica. If those two players were healthy, I would fully back Palmeiras to win this match, but because they're not, I think Chelsea are going to score a goal or two. Now, Palmeiras on their own right have a very good attack, and I think that they'll be able to get one back as well. But I'm going to have to once again agree with your prediction and your scoreline. Believe it or not, I had in my notes, before you said anything, before we communicated, a Chelsea 2-1 win.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's unfortunate because Palmeiras looked really promising going into this tournament and even just in the group stage as well. But yeah, with how that last match against Botafogo turned out, it is kind of questionable as to whether they can last against a team like Chelsea, who has
It's
of
just so
course
unfortunate
got.
when you lose your two best defenders and your captain coming into such a crucial match. It's just so unfortunate, man.
And you're going against a team that's got elite depth because they spend like $1 billion a season. It's
Right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but if you just stack up the benches, I think Chelsea's got this, and they can play for extra time if they need to, because they absolutely have the advantage once they get there. Now, in that case, if we agree on this one too, let's go
Wait,
to.
can I jump the gun? Can I jump the gun real quick? I want to say one more thing.
Go
though.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
My Palmeiras thing did not come to fruition because of this, but I'm gonna jump the gun once again. I have Chelsea make it to the semifinals, but they won't make the finals. I'm gonna say it right now. No matter whether they play Fluminense or Al-Hilal, barring something like what happened to Palmeiras happening, and then they lose a few key players, unless that happens, I don't see Chelsea beating either of these teams. And let me just say why real quick. Fluminense proved through their defense that they can break down offensive teams like Dortmund, like Inter Milan, and I'm sorry, Chelsea's offense, for all the depth that they have, is not better than either of those. So I think that if it's Fluminense, they will win. Similarly, if it's Al Hilal, I think this game would end up being very similar to the Man City game, where Chelsea will have opportunities and they won't be able to capitalize because they're not a very cohesive team. And Al Hilal's cohesion, counterattacking ability, and just the pressure they apply will allow Al Hilal to advance. So I'm gonna say it right now. Unless these two teams beat each other up so bad that they lose players for the semifinals, either of these teams can beat Chelsea.
Okay, interesting. We have some calls going ahead of time. Maybe you'll get bonus points on that when we do our next video. But in the meantime, if we agree on this result, let's go to our first match on the UEFA side of the bracket. So we've got two European teams here. Paris Saint-Germain, Champions League champions, and Bayern Munich.
PSG showed how good they can be when they just lock in. They did a lot of rotating in the group stage, and I was really concerned with the striker spot specifically because they were recycling between Gonzalo Ramos and Mayulu. And with all that recycling, I didn't even realize that they had Doué on the team. And I guess when they actually play their real front three, their real starting 11, which they did for the first time in this knockout stage, they could destroy Inter Miami. I mean, this match looked just like the match against Inter Milan, except instead of Vitinha being the one controlling the midfield, it was all three midfielders absolutely dominating Inter Miami. A funny thing, like, I've talked about this before, how Inter Miami don't have a lot of good players together, and this showed more in this match than ever. This was the one match where genuinely it felt like Messi vs PSG, where it genuinely felt like everybody was just absolutely terrible. I think Zlatan had a quote where he said, Messi isn't playing against his teammates, he's playing against, like, stones or something like that, or some, like, heavy burden. So that really showed, and despite that, I obviously want to get PSG all their credit. They play a very fluid style of football. They dominate the midfield. They're so passing. They are able to always be so unselfish, find spaces, find unconventional routes, and they dominated this game just like they dominated in many games so far, and that they could potentially do continuing this tournament if their opponent isn't very careful with how they set up.
Yeah, this game was lopsided from the start. PSG had control for the full 90 minutes plus change. I mean, Joao Neves ghosted in unmarked to head in the opener, and Inter Miami just fell apart right there. Uh, Neves' second was textbook build-up play. You had a disguised pass from Ruiz, Barcola's pullback, and a clean side-footed finish. And PSG were just moving at 3 times the tempo of Miami. And that just continued on in the first half. You had a deflected own goal from Tomas Aviles, followed by Hakimi's blast off the bar and into the net. 4 goals in 39 minutes, an absolute dissection. And if you look at the stats for Miami, Messi had 14 touches in the first half. Busquets had 10 completed passes. Luis Suarez was seen kicking a water bottle over the barrier in frustration. That just tells you everything about the flow of this match. And to their credit, Miami showed some composure in the second half. Messi nearly scored with a header, and his last-minute free kick had the crowd on their feet. But the mountain was just far too steep. Miami weren't just outplayed, they were completely and utterly outclassed.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. With all due respect to Inter Miami, I think this is a pretty clear and obvious match. So I think we can probably move on to the much more exciting match that came up to the lead up for this, which is Bayern Munich vs Flamengo. I think I remember it was this match where I said this is gonna be the most lopsided match of the round of 16 in Bayern's favor, and you said that Flamengo was gonna win. That just shows how unpredictable this game was. And somehow, even though it's over, I still don't even know what to make of this game. It was so weird. Like, Bayern Munich had less chances, had less XG, and yet in a sense it almost feels like they were a deserving winner. Like Harry Kane, for example, incredible clinicality. He only had 2 shots and he scored both of them. And meanwhile, like with Bayern as well though, like Leon Goretzka, the goal he scores from outside the box, I don't even know what to think about it. I'm just so confused by that because for whatever reason, it's not like it was deflected or anything, but the Flamengo keeper is just stood there looking like a block of wood because I guess he somehow misinterpreted the shot. And at the same time, Flamengo gets quite a few chances on their own, but they aren't able to convert very well. They had, I would say, better chances. And sorry, Rossi is the keeper. Rossi just looks absolutely terrible for Flamengo in that match. There were a few moments as well, though, that made me very nervous about how good this Bayern Munich defense is. Especially, like, I think early on, Flamengo could have gotten their first goal much earlier. It was a cross out where Lamer is right there. He can easily just stop the goal, but he lets himself get beat on the far post by Luis Araujo, and they are bailed out but completely by Neuer. I am not impressed with how Bayern Munich's backline played in this match, and I think if Flamengo were just a little bit more clinical, they could have won this, despite the fact that Bayern scored 4.
I think this game was what we expected in the sense that it was wild, explosive, and very emotional. It had everything. The thing is, Flamengo came to play, but Bayern came to win. I mean, we had an own goal after 6 minutes, immediately setting the tone, and Kane doubled the lead in the 9th. It honestly could have been 3-0 before Flamengo even got a good touch on the ball. But they pushed back. Gerson's laser off the bar made it 2-1, and the red and black faithful in Miami turned up the noise a bit, only to get quieted right away as Goretzka got that banger from distance, exploiting all of that space left in front of Flamengo's retreating back line. 3-1 at the break, all of Bayern's goals from defensive mistakes. And Flamengo, they started the second half brightly. They had a penalty awarded for Elise's handball, but then Bayern, they showed their class again. Kane's second goal, his third of the tournament, completely iced it. Ultimately, Flamengo played with fire and spirit, and despite some defensive lapses, they did give Bayern a good scare. But really, this is a huge win for Bayern. They were so composed throughout this match, and they looked dominant from the start, and it really seemed like every time Flamengo managed to turn the momentum, Bayern stole it right back.
But what makes it so frustrating if you're a Flamengo fan, which I think we all were to an extent for this match because we're all cheering for the underdog, it's so frustrating because Flamengo really works for every goal, fully deserving the goals that they got, whereas a goal is a goal in football and there's no rewards for quote-unquote deserving to win. But it feels like Bayern Munich were sort of bailed out in a way by every goal. Harry Kane having absolute class, but there's not much that the team did to lead him to those chances. Just Harry Kane being one of the best strikers in the world. You have the Goretzka goal, which is just really unlucky. I don't even know why Rossi isn't able to save it, but it's just quite unlucky. And that first goal, I mean, no work was done. Gerson just gets unlucky, causing an own goal from a corner. It feels like it felt very undeserving, and it just felt like no matter what Flamengo did, it was almost like they were cursed. They were just not able to get back to this game as deserving as they should have been.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about with the Palmeiras-Chelsea game how it could be a game that is swung by a few individual stars. And it seems like a couple players on the Bayern roster really managed to do that for them in this match against Flamengo. It was a pretty huge win for Bayern, but yeah, they didn't show much team play here, and I wouldn't necessarily fault them for that. They just had a couple great strikes, great performances from a few key players. But we will have to see how they manage to do in the quarterfinals because they are going up against a very stacked team in PSG. Now, in regards to that match, this is elite versus elite. Two clubs that expect to win this whole tournament. Two squads stacked with depth, experience, and stars. You've got PSG's wide players, especially Barcola and Kvaratskhelia, who are lethal in space. If Upamecano steps out without cover, expect Enrique's side to go direct and aggressive. And Goretzka also needs to be very careful because if he's caught out, PSG are going to find the pocket behind him repeatedly, and their stars can absolutely take advantage of that space. Now, you also have to think about Bayern's ace, Harry Kane, so far with that most recent match anyways. But I think he's going to get far fewer clear chances than he did versus Flamengo when Bayern were able to take advantage of the space they left in front of their defensive line. PSG are not going to make those same mistakes. And I think Kingsley Coman is also gone, and his likely absence is going to hurt Bayern. It removes arguably their best dribbler and reduces the unpredictability of their front three. There is bad blood here between these two teams from the recent UCL clashes. Both sides know each other, and that might create a tense atmosphere early. I'm going to expect PSG to score first, Bayern to rally, and the final 15 minutes will basically turn into a shootout. But PSG's late game options are going to tip it. Neuer might need to have a heroic day again, but if PSG can pin him to his line, that's a risk Bayern won't like. And I'm going to say that PSG go through barely, but they're going to leave dents doing it. I will give it a 3-2 scoreline, the closest match so far for PSG to go through to the semis.
It seems like there's a good chance, by the way, that Jamal Musiala will actually be back and fit for this match, which is also a potential X factor that will help Bayern Munich. With him, I think they'll have a very strong and efficient offense, and I actually still do think that Harry Kane will get a few chances. Remember, he doesn't need to have many in order to score a few goals. Like, he only had 2 shots against Flamengo, and he scored those 2 shots. So I definitely see that Bayern could score 1 or 2 again, despite PSG having such a strong defense, because with Musiala back and with the offense that Bayern just has in general. I expect them to get a few chances. The defense is the issue for Bayern. Again, I think they're very suspect against Flamengo. They were lucky. There were times when the players were like playing out of position. They weren't together. They weren't very cohesive. And I think PSG will take advantage of a weakened and tactically questionable defense the way that they always seem to do every time this sort of stuff happens. I expect PSG to score a lot of goals. I mean, this is going to be a sort of similar, not tactically, but a similar in the sense that the defense has seemed a bit frazzled to the match that Inter has played against Inter Miami. Similar to the match that PSG played against Inter Miami. Similar to the match PSG played even against Inter Milan. So I think PSG will once again score quite a few goals. And I'm going to have PSG finally winning this with a scoreline of 4-2. An absolute shootout all game long.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of scoring for sure. I mean, we saw it from Bayern in their match against Flamengo. There were just wild shots being taken and lots of them going in as well. And I'm sure we'll see it in this match too. Now, I think then that's going to leave us with one final match of the quarterfinals to predict. And we've agreed on the first 3, so we'll have to see if we disagree here. And this match, I'm going to say we probably will agree, but again, we'll see. It is Real Madrid versus the Yellow Wall, Borussia Dortmund.
So starting with that Real Madrid match that they played against Juventus, it's quite interesting that while some players like Vinny Jr., like Bellingham, haven't been showing the offensive production that we've been used to seeing in the past few years, they have so much depth that it almost doesn't matter. Like someone like Gonzalo Garcia, for example, who was practically unknown to the world before this match, being the backup striker to Mbappe, he has scored, not prior to this match, prior to the tournament, he has scored or assisted in every match so far in the Club World Cup. And once again, I think he had one shot this match, it was that header, and he once again capitalizes it. Madrid completely dominated this match. And I think despite the fact that Di Gregorio had yet another masterclass for Juventus, as he did against Man City as well, it was just too much. Madrid just provided way too much offensively, and despite that Gregorio making quite a few saves and Rugani making a goal line clearance early, Real Madrid ended up winning. They chipped away, they got the win, and if it weren't for all those heroics, it could have been 3 or 4.
If we look at Madrid's threats as well, just Gonzalo Garcia continues to make headlines. Another poacher's finish, this time from a pinpoint Trent Alexander-Arnold cross to give Madrid the win. And yeah, Mbappe returned, but it was Garcia who has starred again. He now has 3 goals in 4 matches, and he is playing with confidence well beyond his age. Juve, they started well. Kolomuani nearly chipped Courtois early, and Yildiz tested Valverde and Tchouaméni with some pretty aggressive runs. But as the half wore on, Real Madrid settled, and somewhat unsurprisingly, they started to pull Juve apart. Di Gregorio had to make some huge saves on Valverde twice, Bellingham and Hausen to keep things tight. And Real, they played with purpose. The 3-4-3 system is now humming under Xabi Alonso. Bellingham is freer, and Guile and Valverde have provided verticality from deeper positions. And speaking of Guile, he nearly doubled Madrid's lead with a crisp drive, and Trent as well looked as comfortable on the right as he ever has in white. Juve ultimately lacked the end product. They didn't get a single shot on target in the second half, and their early rhythm fizzled out under Madrid's press. And despite only scoring 1 goal, Madrid managed a composed, quite surgical win. Nothing flashy really, just classical tournament football. Quarterfinals, here we come.
Yeah, I think Xabi Alonso is, even for just a few matches so far, just for this Club World Cup, he is already starting to build a cohesive team. We saw defensive solidity, whereby playing a 3-in-the-back system and letting Trent Alexander-Arnold have much more attacking freedom, that just makes the team so much better. And one thing I want to praise about Xabi Alonso is he's willing to substitute out players, not play quote-unquote the best players, in order to maximize the team potential. Most notably, Rodrigo, who has been a key instrumental starter for Real Madrid over the past few years, basically hasn't played much in this Club World Cup at all. And it's not like he wasn't injured or anything. He was called up to the Club World Cup. He has gotten a few minutes. But the fact that Xabi Alonso is willing to say, nah, we don't need you. I'm going to play my way, and we're going to make it work. And he's been proving it. He's been talking the talk. And he's been walking the walk as well. Sorry, I got the analogy wrong there. I mean, I think we should definitely give him a lot of props, and that's going to be a key factor for Real Madrid, not just in this Club World Cup, but over the next few years in this new Xabi era.
Yeah, I mean, I think, expected a Real Madrid win here. It was pretty close scoreline-wise, but again, like I said, very composed, very surgical, and it is a great look for sure for Xabi Alonso's system. Now, I think we can move on to our other team in this quarterfinal match, Dortmund, who put on quite a masterclass to start off their game against Monterrey, especially with Guirassy, his movement and his finishing. They, of course, got 2 goals in the first 25, again, both from Guirassy, so his brace. Both assisted, I think, by Adeyemi to give them an early cushion. But to Monterrey's credit, they didn't quit. Jesus Corona, the great Tecatito, combined with Aguirre and Berterame for a wonderful goal to bring it to 2-1 just after the start of the second half. And speaking of Jesus Corona, he was everywhere. Chance creation, wide overloads, even defensive recovery. He nearly equalized twice in the second half. But if I'm going to bring him up, I also do need to bring up the officiating in this game. Because Monterrey head coach Dominic Torrent, he was furious post-match, and with good reason. There were some quite questionable calls with no review from VAR. There was a strong penalty shout at one point when Tecatito got tripped in the box. No review, no whistle. Defender Rodriguez, he said after the match that he felt it was a very clear foul from his perspective, though of course, to be fair, he is a Monterrey player. But there was also the second Dortmund goal in that first half, which came after a borderline foul on Arteaga at Dortmund's end by Julian Ryerson. There was no review from VAR on that either. The Monterrey staff were left pretty baffled, and it's not just that these decisions seemed like they didn't go Monterrey's way. It was the lack of review protocol behind these decisions. This is the Club World Cup. These things matter. Hell, that potential foul by Ryerson led straight to a second Dortmund goal in the same play. And I think even Dortmund fans would admit the breaks tended to go their way. VAR inconsistency has been a theme in this tournament, and I believe Monterrey were the latest victims. There have been shouts of rigging. Of course, I have no way to confirm or deny that, but whatever happened here, I think Monterrey were very unlucky to fall on the wrong side of so many of these calls.
Yeah, this was definitely a badly officiated game that Monterrey, I would argue, actually just deserved to win straight up. Now, I definitely have to give Dortmund a lot of credit. They were very good in the first half offensively, but my one concern for them is that they seem kind of one-dimensional. We've seen this throughout the Club World Cup, and honestly throughout Dortmund in European competitions as well this season. It's just Sekou Guirassy. In this match, the only player that got a shot off, that registered a shot on his entire Dortmund squad in 90 minutes was Sekou Guirassy. And while they might have been able to get away with that against CF Monterrey, when they go and play Real Madrid, they're going to have to diversify, or else that's going to be a big, big problem. And I also don't have a lot of confidence in this Dortmund backline. I mean, I would agree, Tekketino absolutely should have gotten that penalty in the first half, and he didn't. And even later, when Tekketino Corona gets a few chances, he cuts through the Dortmund defense on more than one occasion. He infiltrates, but he is unable to finish his chances. There was one where he gets a one-on-one opportunity with the keeper that he misses, and you know why he got that opportunity in the first place? Nicolas Soule steps up to do an offside trap, but his other center backs seem to be completely disconnected. It's like the three center backs for Dortmund are not playing on the same team. Similarly, that goal that Bertarame scored, where is Waldemar Anton going? It looks like he's just lost in the box. His positioning is absolutely terrible, and they should have cleared that ball, but they weren't able to. Dortmund looked good in the first half, but it was pretty terrible in the second, and they conceded full control of the tempo to Monterrey. And I feel like if Sergio Ramos scores a last-minute header and this goes into extra time, I think Monterrey take the momentum and they would have won this match.
Right, and I mean, you're talking about the defense. Of course, they left a lot of questions to be answered coming into this next match. But yeah, even with the offense, Guirassy, he could have had a hat trick before the half. But since, like you said, no one else registered a shot, it's definitely not a good look for Dortmund's offensive line that you've got one guy taking all these chances for them, and he could be scoring a bunch of goals, and everyone else is expected to score nothing. Dortmund, I think also they would have missed Joe Bellingham's composure quite a bit in the second half. He was suspended, I'm pretty sure, and it did show in their play because Monterrey started to boss around the midfield after the break. And Ramos, yes, that Ramos, nearly found a late equalizer. A very late one, actually. His towering header grazed the post in the dying seconds. You could hear the hearts stop in the Benz Stadium. And so, despite the drama, despite the many questionable calls, Dortmund do advance, but Monterrey leave with heads high, arguably better on the day, and robbed by the margins. And so for the Yellow Wall, Real Madrid awaits next, and they will not give this version of Dortmund any freebies.
Yeah, looking ahead to this match, I think it was Gregor Kobel, honestly. He should also deserve quite a bit of credit into preventing this from ultimately being a disaster for Dortmund and for them losing. But here's the thing. Real Madrid just got past a very, very strong performance that Di Gregorio had. So even though Gregor Kobel have already saved Dortmund 3 out of 4 times, he can have another masterclass, and Madrid might be able to win anyways. They might be able to get 1 or 2 goals anyways. Dortmund, I think, could absolutely score a goal for a Guirassy masterclass, but I think with the way Xabi Alonso has lined up this Madrid system, they'll be so defensively disciplined that if they don't catch on immediately, they will quickly catch on to the fact that he is the one guy. They will make the defensive adjustments, and from there on, I expect Dortmund to be completely dead offensively, and I don't think they'll be able to score more than 1 goal maximum in this match. Now, comparatively, Real Madrid, they have been very good. They were able to chip away at the game, which they had against Juventus, and I think with Dortmund, who have an arguably worse defense, just as good of a keeper, but again, there's only so much you can do in net. I think Real Madrid should win this match pretty comfortably, and I'm going to give them a 2-0 win.
Real Madrid are doing that thing again. They're just quietly, efficiently rolling through a knockout tournament without ever seeming stressed. And Alonso's hybrid system is causing opponents so much trouble because Trent drifts inside and it creates overloads that players like Tchouaméni and Bellingham are able to exploit masterfully. And you go to Borussia, you go to Dortmund here, and they looked beatable versus Monterrey. Like they very easily could have and perhaps should have lost this match. Their defense was constantly pulled out of shape, and if not for Kobel, like you said, they could have conceded a bunch of goals. Madrid's pace isn't overwhelming, but their timing is. You have Guile, Valverde, and Bellingham all picking their moments to surge forward, and it breaks low blocks, which means Dortmund is not going to be able to play hoping for a goalless draw into extra time or anything of the sort. So Dortmund's best path is to win in the first 15 minutes. They've got to score early. And if they go behind early, Madrid will just strangle the game to death with possession. Not too different from what they did with Juve. Adeyemi can burn anyone on a break, but will he get the service? Madrid's got a strong midfield and they don't let many second balls escape. And as for Kobel, he has to be perfect again. His form has kept Dortmund alive, but Madrid have a way of beating great keepers with sheer volume and precision as well. This feels like Madrid's match to control. They're going to frustrate, absorb, and then punish. It's just what they do. A 3-0 or maybe a 2-0 or 4-0 with a handful of goals for Madrid and none for Dortmund feels fair to me. Not because Dortmund aren't dangerous, but because Madrid just won't give them the space or the opportunities to prove that they are. And so I'm going to have to give this to Real Madrid with a 3-0 win. Unfortunately, I don't see Borussia Dortmund scoring, and so they're going to get knocked out goalless in this match, and Real Madrid will move on to the semifinals.
All right, so this time it looks like we had the same prediction for every match. So either we're gonna both be geniuses, or we're gonna both be frauds.
Yeah, if we go down together, I suppose.
Oh boy.
Okay.
I was really considering, like, trying to screw a few and go with the Palmeiras win or go with the Fluminense win. Palmeiras especially because I actually do genuinely rate this Palmeiras squad and it's really unlucky. But I just couldn't get myself to do it. I just don't believe it.
It's unfortunate, man. I've been backing the Brazilian teams to go far. I'm sure a lot of people have, but just off of the way that these teams have played, I mean, Palmeiras, they got their 1-0 against Botafogo, but they had to go into extra time to do it. And I said that Botafogo's XG was real low. I think I said, like 0.13 in regulation time. But Palmeiras didn't have especially high XG either. And then you just look at the Hilal game, 4-3 against Man City, and it's like these guys can definitely create lots of chances. Despite Al-Dawsari being gone, they scored so much. Like I was saying in our previous video that they wouldn't score anything because Al-Hilal's best threat was Al-Dawsari and he's injured. Apparently they didn't need him to go ham. So it's looking like they can create a lot, and I don't know that Palmeiras, like a team like Fluminense or Palmeiras can necessarily do the same. And then Chelsea have got a lot of attacking threats too, just because, I mean, look at how big their team is. And they've got depth, which is another thing these Brazilian teams cannot quite count on in comparison to European ones. So, unfortunately, I guess we have both the remaining teams from CONMEBOL getting knocked out here, which would then leave us with one AFC team in Al-Hilal and 3 European teams in Chelsea, PSG, and Real Madrid. So I guess we'll just have to come back for the semifinals. Hopefully we get more non-European teams, but I mean we'll just have to see, and we'll be following up on our predictions once the quarterfinals are all clear.
All right. Well, I mean, listen, I just said basically that I think Al-Hilal are going to make the finals, which would be absolutely crazy. But yeah, we'll see. And I think that's going to end it for our episode. So if you guys enjoyed it, please like, please subscribe, please comment. What else can you even do? Just
Like, comment, turn your notifications on as well.
Oh
Because
yeah,
we
that's the
upload
other thing.
decently off. We're uploading decently often at the moment, and maybe you're not maybe you're interested in one tournament like Club World Cup, or maybe you don't watch Gold Cup. But like we've got coverage on both of these tourneys right now, so we will be putting out videos. If you're interested in even just one of those tournaments, we'll have videos that you might be interested in watching. So just make sure you turn on your notifications, and you'll hopefully be able to see all the new videos we upload. And yeah, you can decide if you're interested in giving them a watch. But I mean, just for watching for the full hour, because it looks like this video will be about an hour long, we'd like to thank you for that, for sticking around. And yeah, please do tune in for our next upload. And have a good day.
All right, see ya.